As of lately, I've been searching for a weapon to use over the breaker, as the breaker is such an amazing weapon, but it does get a bit old using the same weapon over and over again. But I also wanted to use something that is also clearly powerful, and after doing my research time and time again, players were recommending the Slugger shotgun, which is a very accurate shotgun that fires slug rounds that is capable of one-hitting pretty much every single unit from small to medium-sized units as long as you precisely hit their weak spots. So naturally, that got my attention and I figured I'd try it out. So in today's video, I'll break down my findings and my thoughts on these two weapons in comparison, and we'll find out whether the Slugger has what it takes to dethrone the breaker shotgun. Do note that my experience comes from a solo Helldiver player that plays on the higher difficulties, but my experience is strictly bound to that. Grouped players or lower difficulty players may have a different experience than what I had. Anyways, we'll be looking at these weapons from a statistical point of view as well as my own personal experience and thoughts for each one of these weapons. As I stated earlier, the Slugger shotgun packs a hell of a punch, doing roughly about 280 damage per shot, which is enough to take down all of the small to medium targets with just one clean, precise shot. The Slugger also has the capability of blowing up doors with one shot instead of having to waste a grenade, and is very accurate at long ranges due to its slug shots, and is capable of blowing up most enemies' limbs and weak spots with just one shot. It makes for a very powerful choice when going up against automatons, as the precision shots to enemies' weak spots is far more important, unlike the Terminids. Generally, weak spots on Terminids are oftentimes not as relevant for the smaller units, but does it have enough power to outperform the breaker? The answer is no. Sadly, it doesn't. Matter of fact, the Slugger has the third weakest damage per second statistic out of all weapons available in Helldivers 2 so far, only slightly beating the Liberator Explosive and the last 5 Scythe Bath Battery weapon. To give you an idea of how large of a difference we're talking about here, the Slugger has a DPS of 373, whereas the breaker can pull off 1650 damage per second, well over 4 times as much DPS. Now that's not to say that the breaker is 4 times better than the Slugger. The DPS count on a weapon isn't what's going to make a weapon simply better than another. There are a lot of different factors that go into a weapon that can make it better than others. It's not just pure damage. The problem is the Slugger loses in most aspects comparing with the breaker. Let's just quickly go over a few of them. The Slugger, fully supplied, will bring you an ammo count of 56 shots, whereas the breaker will carry 128 shots. The Slugger has a reload time of about 5.3 seconds to fully reload. Granted, you can shoot while reloading, but still, the breaker will fully reload its 16 shots in only 2 seconds, more than twice as fast. The Slugger has a fire rate of 80 shots per minute. The breaker can shoot 300 shots per minute, more than 3 times as fast. So generally, statistically, the breaker will outperform the Slugger in every sense of the word. But there is one factor that doesn't play much into statistics. The Slugger will do 280 damage per shot, the breaker will do 330. But the thing is, the Slugger shoots slugs, meaning there is minimal spread, so the entire 280 damage is more concentrated in one location, whereas the breaker will have a pellet spread, making the Slugger better at dealing with weak spots, or in other words, better at dealing with automatons from longer ranges. And not just that, but despite it not being listed, the Slugger is actually a medium armor penetration weapon, making it even better at dealing with automatons. Statistics aside, I took both weapons on several Helldiver difficulty solo matches and tried them both out extensively. For Terminid factions, there isn't much of a conversation here, sadly. For solo play, the Slugger firing much slower, reloading much slower, and having less than half the ammo count the breaker has is simply too big of a burden to carry when you're having to deal with dozens of bugs constantly swarming you from every direction. What is great about the Slugger for Terminids though is that it will one-shot a hunter, whereas the breaker from the usual range will take 2 shots. But that's about the only positive thing I found for the Slugger when dealing with the Terminid. The breaker against the Terminids will win 10 times out of 10. There is no situation at which I would recommend the Slugger over the breaker. For automatons though is where the question arises of whether the Slugger can compete. I'm actively on the search for a better weapon to deal with automatons, as I don't quite feel the breaker is going to be my best choice. But sadly, I don't think the Slugger is quite it. It's amazing at hitting those weak spots, I can't lie, and I won't sit here and say the breaker is much better than the Slugger for automatons, because it isn't. I mean, it is a little bit better due to its far increased ammo count, but the Slugger shouldn't be slept on in automaton play at all. The biggest issue about the Slugger is still the fact that it shoots so slow, meaning you'll still get swarmed pretty easily, and having to reload extremely slowly while being rocketed isn't particularly my idea of a fun time. Also, Helldivers 2 has an insane amount of flinch, or aim punt, whatever it is that you want to call it. You know when you get shot and your aim goes right up into the sky? Yeah, that. Even the weakest of hits mess up your aim badly, making it extremely frustrating to deal with the weak spots the more enemy there are, as you're constantly flinching, as you're constantly getting shot at. Whereas the Breaker has more of that blindly spam your weapon and hope for the best factor that can save you quite often when dealing with smaller guys and berserkers. So all in all, can the Slugger dethrone the Breaker for solo play? Not really, which is a bit of a shame. For automatons, some players may want to opt in for accuracy, and I could definitely find myself using the Slugger some games, especially in group play, as there won't be as much aim flinching, but solo players will be quickly punished as soon as they're swarmed by little guys that won't quite allow you to be very accurate. Now, my own personal search continues for another weapon that can be greatly used in solo play, and I'll go ahead and make sure to let you guys know when that happens. And until then, go spread some democracy, Helldivers. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.